We are in the finals of the American Cup 2004 and the first three games between Wesley So and Levon Aronian have ended in a draw. Now it's game 4, a rapid game, 15 minutes plus 10 seconds increment per move, and Wesley So is playing with the white pieces. It's an incredible fight, an incredible game with a lot of fantastic things happening on these 64 squares. Let's just dive straight into the action, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to see more exciting games. So here Wesley So goes for 1d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and like in many other games of this tournament, the Nimzo Indian defense. And well, mainly we have been covering this move e3, the Rubinstein variation, but Wesley sticks to his main repertoire with the move queen c2. It's the classical variation. The queen protects the knight on c3. And after castling kingside, now a very direct way of playing here for white is to occupy the center with the move e4. Now white is having a great center with these three pawns, nice space advantage, and black needs to think about how to challenge white's center. By far the main move here, and theoretically speaking the best continuation for white, for black, it's the move d5. It's a nice way to challenge the center. There's a lot of theory, but Levon Aronian goes for the move c5, which has also been played, but it's considered to be a little bit tricky. Let's see how it goes. e5, attacking the knight on f6, but black is not going away with that knight. Stays there on f6, pawn takes d4, hitting the knight on c3. And here Wesley goes for the move a3, attacking the bishop. It's already quite a mess, but the players, they know what they are doing. There are quite a number of options here for black. You can take on c3, you can also move the bishop away. Levon decides to go for the move bishop a5. And now after pawn takes f6, black has to take the knight on c3, threatening to take on b2 with a devastating discovered check. But white goes for the move b4, hitting the bishop on a5. The bishop goes back to c7, and now pawn takes g7, opening up black's king, attacking the rook. And now very interesting and instructive moment, as black doesn't want to take that pawn. It will open up its king's position. And rook e8 is a much better way of playing. And remember this kind of idea, that the pawn on g7, it will make it actually harder for the white pieces to get access to the black king. And now, well, I think Levon had still prepared all of this. It's an incredibly sharp position, and probably the key move here for white to continue is bishop d3. Inserting this move, hitting the pawn on h7, does make a lot of sense. If you do play f5 to defend against that threat of bishop takes h7, well, queen takes c3, and well, frankly speaking, it looks like it's a good position for white, but still, it's a total mess. In any case, rather than putting the bishop on d3, black had to deal here with the move knight to f3. And there are various ways of playing. I mean, if you want to save your pawn on c3, queen f6 would actually make a lot of sense. It's a principled way of not capturing the pawn on c3 by a white. And okay, it's a tricky position. Maybe the queen instead of the king can take the pawn on g7. But Aronian has a different plan. He goes for the move d5. He wants to open up the position. That's why the rook is actually on e8. White is of course not interested in taking on d5. That will only help black's pieces to get into the game. And still, a lot of interesting possibilities, including this move, knight g5, with a huge threat of threatening checkmate on h7. You may defend here still once again with the move f5, but now after queen takes c3, you have to be very careful that queen h3 is not coming very soon with renewal of the mating threat on h7. Well, it's tricky position, was not played in the game, as Wesley decided here to take on c3, but now black comes forward with its e-pawn, e5. Nice move, pawn takes d5, and here e4. Attacking the knight on f3. Knight d4 played, and the bishop comes into e5. Nice positional move. The bishop is ruling this long diagonal. It's pinning the knight on d4. And well, if you want, you can probably at some point take on g7. But interestingly, it does make sense for black not to take the pawn immediately, not giving white any hopes of setting up an strong threat against the black king. Bishop b2 was played. Maybe the bishop is actually a bit better on e3, where it will prevent black from ever advancing its e-pawn. But bishop b2 is also understandable. Knight d7. Interesting idea. Rather than taking with the queen on d5, which might be interesting as well, black wants to take the pawn with a knight. So knight f6, knight takes d5 is on the agenda. Therefore, bishop b5 played to pin the knight on d7, and black goes for a6. Very interesting move. And, well, I expected white here to play the move bishop a4 to maintain the pin. And if black tries to unpin with the move b5, okay, you have bishop b3, you're protecting the pawn. And after moving the queen away, at some point maybe you can make use of the c6 square with your knight, for instance. But, okay, being under pressure from the start, it's very understandable that Wesley So thinks, okay, let's get rid of the knight on d7. He captures that knight with the bishop. Bishop takes d7, castles. And okay, if white is able to consolidate its position, maybe he's not doing too badly here. But how should black continue? And well, almost instantly, Aronian played here the move queen h4, threatening checkmate in one. But things are not that clear. In fact, he missed here a great opportunity with the move bishop b5. Attacking the rook. Of course, the bishop cannot be taken as the knight on d4 is pinned. And after moving the rook somewhere, the bishop will come to d3. It's fantastically controlling the center, getting the support from the pawn on e4. And next, you can just take the pawn on d5 with an overwhelming advantage for black, having the bishop pair, more space. Very unpleasant pin for white to deal with. But okay, it was not played. Aronian had different ideas on his mind, threatening checkmate in one. It's of course very tempting move, but it runs into g3, attacking the queen to h3. And I think Aronian was believing that with ideas like bishop to g4 and then bringing the bishop to f3, you're setting up a huge mating threat on the light squares. You may even first eliminate the knight on d4. But as I said, the knight is pinned, so this is a huge threat. But the next move is very important, and probably it was underestimated by Aronian, as white played here f4. So it not only attacks the bishop, but it also helps the major pieces to gain control, for instance, over the second rank, dealing with all potential mating threats. And, well, another big point here is that pawn takes f3 will be met by queen takes f3 with a huge mating threat on f7. All of a sudden, it's white who's taking over here in this position. He's still material up, and most importantly, its pieces are nicely coordinated now. Anyway, pawn takes f3 was not played. Bishop f6 on the board. And, well, understandably, white decides here to move the queen out of the pin, putting the queen on e3. But I'm frankly not convinced. In general, it's not a great place for the queen to be the blockader. The queen becomes pretty passive. And in hindsight, probably a move like rook ae1, bringing the remaining piece into the game, is a more sensible way of playing for white. But queen e3 played, and now bishop to g4. There are still always ideas to take on d4, maybe put the bishop on f3. Therefore, white played the move rook f2, guarding the g2 square. It's never going to be made there, but now rook a8, simple plan, attacking the pawn on d5. Knight b3, offering the exchange of bishops. But look what's happening now. Rook takes d5. That's a big move, because white can actually not really capture the bishop on f6. It will run into the move rook d3 with a double attack on the knight and on the queen. And, well, obviously on the next move you can regain the piece, but probably after a move like queen c5, even stronger for black is to insert the move e3. You have a very strong passed pawn hitting the rook, and well, it's just a tremendous attack for black. So therefore, instead of taking the bishop on f6, white played rook e1. Very clever move, because now rook d3 is not so strong any longer. It can be met by the queen sacrifice. Queen takes d3. As the pawn on e4 is pinned after e takes d3, white is getting two rooks for the queen. King takes pawn, bishop takes, king takes. I mean, it's still a very complicated position with the queen versus two rooks. Okay, black also has a passed pawn, but there are no immediate threats here. So it's absolutely unclear. Probably both sides have chances to play for a win. In any case, instead of rook d3, black decided to take on b2 first. Rook takes b2. Now the dark squared bishops have been exchanged. But okay, it's no longer going to be mate, and still rook d3 can just be met by queen takes d3. So that's not going to work. Queen h6 was Aronian's move in the game. He believed that the queen has done its job there and decided that after rook d2 the queen needs to be centralized again. One pair of rooks were swapped here, and well, we have a different situation. Normally you're not getting checkmated here any longer, but with a pawn on f4, white's king is still a bit exposed. But okay, therefore knight e2 is played, and it's not really with the aim of taking the pawn on e4. It could be an idea at some point, because there are also knight f6 ideas. But okay, black just defends the pawn here with bishop f5. And well, I think there are many different ways, many reasonable options for white. Wesley So played here knight f1 with the idea of moving the queen away and probably to install the knight on e3. The knight is indeed a much better blockading piece. However, maybe knight f3 is also an interesting move, so that you can go to d4 or maybe to e5 at some point. Of course, the knight cannot be taken as the rook on e8 is there. But knight f1 was played, bishop h3, so that if you move the queen, you gotta reckon with ideas like e3, and then the light squares are clearly vulnerable. So knight goes back to d2. This is an indirect draw offer by Wesley So. He's offering the repetition of moves, but you can see from the opening choice by Aronian, going for such a sharp system, he's putting a lot of questions to his opponent, and he just feels like, okay, I can keep the game going. There's no need to go back with the bishop and settle for this draw. But he played rook e6. I think that is making a lot of sense. It's a nice way of getting your rook supported. Now after knight takes e4, there is no knight check on f6. Black can simply play bishop f5 and the knight is just lost. So therefore you also support your pawn on e4. Rook c1 was played in the game, and finally that little pawn on g7 is taken. And white thinks, okay, now with rook c5 I'm hitting the black queen, and after the queen goes away there are even ideas of giving a check on g5. Should be clear that, by the way, if you go for the exchange of queens, then all of a sudden black is getting a passed pawn with threats of entering with the rook on e1 with check, and maybe later rook e2. There are ideas to win the knight on d2. Anyway, rook g5 was played in the game. Another solid way of handling this situation is to go back with the rook to c3, trying to maintain that blockade on the dark squares. I think that's absolutely playable for white. But rook g5, tempting move, putting finally a question to black. What are you going to do with that king? There are many options. King f8, king h8, king h6, king f6. Very tricky position, and still I'm not sure which of these king moves is the best. But I really think that the move played by Aronian is a very tricky one and an excellent choice. He goes with the king to f8. So the king looks relatively safe here. There are not that many checks apart from the move queen c5, which was played in the game. You're giving a check, and it looks as if now white is taking over with the queen and the rook. All of a sudden it's white who is playing for a mating attack. I mean, if you go with your king to e8, then it's rook g8, and this is going really wrong for black. But what Wesley So overlooked is that with this move, rook d6, you can parry the check. Now the rook is fantastically supported by the queen, and there is no queen c8 check, as this bishop is also working backwards. It's guarding the c8 square, and all of a sudden white is in big trouble because the knight is under threat. If the knight goes somewhere, there will even be queen f1 with checkmate. So it's the white king who is in deep trouble, and in fact the game is just lost now. Rook h5 played. Not much else you can do. I mean, the idea is that now after queen takes d2, rook takes h3, at least materially speaking, it is even. But the position is just really bad. What black wants to do is give a check. But if you do so, you can still not activate your rook because the rook is pinned. So therefore, Aronian comes up with a very nice, classy solution by playing the move b6. He is attacking the queen on c5, and the queen gotta go somewhere. If you give a check on c8, it's rook d8, you're blocking the check, counter-attacking the queen, and whatever you do with this queen, there will follow a check on the back rank, followed by rook d2, and the queen and rook are giving checkmate because the king can't go to h3, can't go to f3, so this is hopeless. After b6 there are no good moves. For instance, even if you would play a move like queen f2 for instance, there are many good moves. I've pointed out that e3, attacking the queen, is also just a great idea because you can never exchange queens because of e takes d2 and the pawn will be promoted. So that is just one of the many good ways of converting the position for black. After b6, as I said, there are no good moves. Wesley So resigned, and the winner of the American Cup is Levon Aronian, taking home $75,000 plus $15,000 by winning the Champions Bracket. Very impressive performance by Levon Aronian, defeating so many top grandmasters and also in great style, including this game. So I thought that was a very nice model game, how to play for a win just by putting a lot of pressure on your opponent. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this game? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more exciting games from top level chess. See you soon!